School District, so thank you for letting us be here tonight. I'm Nicole Haas. I'm the treasurer on our Board of Education.
And then I'm Ryan Sandberg. I'm the Director of Business Services at Salem Grade School.
So we're basically here because, as I'm sure everyone's heard, our district is out for an operational referendum. And in our efforts of really working the last couple of years on our community engagement, we know the community has a lot of questions, particularly when it comes to school finance. So we just wanted to make ourselves extra available to answer questions. We are completely transparent. As the board treasurer, I am working monthly with Ryan. I'm looking at bank statements, checks in, checks out. And on top of that, in the last 2 years in the role, coming to the realization that school finance is its own beast. I came from the private sector. It's completely different. It's not what I thought it was. So with that, the board unanimously approved the need for an operational referendum. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about why, what that means, and if you have any questions, that is what we're here for.
Yeah, and so I would like to make sure people understand one of the reasons why we're doing these events is our efforts to be very transparent with our taxpayers. I think in the past, people have felt, from what I've heard, that they didn't have access to information, couldn't get questions answered, or sometimes if questions were asked, there was sometimes a spiral around the question versus an answer to the question. And so it's really important to me that people get the information about how we're spending their money. And so that's another one of the reasons why I'm really appreciative that you're allowing us to be here. Maybe you've seen some of the pictures, like we've been at Drifters or being at Culver's, because we don't want to expect people to come to us. We're trying to make ourselves available to the community. And anytime someone is asked to see statements and spreadsheets, like on our how we're doing and spending our money, that's something to me, it's very important. Like we want people to have it. So one of the things, the biggest question I've been getting lately, and I'd like to just kind of give you some of those things. One of the things, what are we doing to make sure that we are not overspending? So I want to share some of those things. What are we doing to reduce costs as much as we can? And then why do we need to keep doing this? It's really fatiguing for taxpayers to continuously hear school districts ask for more money. First of all, an operating referendum is different than a capital improvement. So we did have a bill, so I'm really thankful for our taxpayers helping us have some of the renovations that we needed. We didn't really know how bad the structural issues in our building were, where people were moving back and forth. There was no foundation. So that operational referendum, it actually gave us a foundation. It was toilet areas. There was urination into the soil. It was like there were real issues in that building. And so our operating referendum not only addressed those things, but gave us access so our students in wheelchairs could make it around the building, so ADA accessible, and then have spaces that our community said they were really looking for, which would be some of those spaces where you can have home economics. We really believe that it's important to bring back some of those traditional programs that we have lost over time, because we think the trades and those programs at home ec are really important. So that was our capital improvement. We've had for the last 9 years an operational referendum, and we asked for that. It's been successful over every 3 years. What these aren't doing, they're not compounding sources of revenue for our district. So in 1993, and you can see in that diagram, you'll see that the revenue limits were established for districts. So in Paddock Lake, Salem, in this area, people were very fiscally conservative with how much we were spending on our per pupil for students. So an amazing job to what was going on in 1993, where you can see some districts are in different colors. They were spending at a higher rate, and in some of those districts, they're overspending and they're exceeding their expenditure, they're exceeding their revenue. The expenditures are not, they're exceeding their revenue in. This area we weren't. We were fiscally conservative. I wasn't here. That's thanks to the community here to do a great job. However, in 1993, we froze the amount that per pupil was given. And so until 2010,
districts were keeping up with CPI. So the amount that students were receiving per pupil was keeping up. 2010, it stopped. So at 1993, Salem that was where our limit was, whereas other districts, they were given more, and they've been, since then, going like this. So they've been given money, and this gap is continuously there. What you'll see in that diagram, right now, we're at the 11,000 mark. There's districts that are getting, in some cases, over $20,000 per student. So what happened is essentially students in Salem are being penalized because people were being responsible and fiscally conservative with their spending in 1993. So what that forces several districts to do is need to go to an operating referendum. So we're really just asking to maintain the programs that we're having. We're not, like one of the community members says, I don't understand why you need to keep doing it. It's almost like a Netflix, for lack of better, like a Netflix subscription. The subscription's ending, or like that 3-year referendum, it's ending, and we're asking for another 3-year referendum to continue our to help us make our ends meet. And I want to say, like, we are really intentional. Our board is doing an amazing job. Like Nicole said, is she goes through our line by lines. We try to make sure that we are as lean as we possibly can be. Another thing I hear often in the community is administration. Like, what are we doing to make sure we're not having the bloat at the top? And so we've been working with other districts to look at ways that we can share administrators. We've talked with another district nearby because that is a concern. The work is scalable, so it would be an opportunity for districts to share some of those overhead costs without touching the student needs. Like, we don't want to take the teachers, we don't want larger class sizes. So making sure that if we're making, and we've made cuts at that level, but we don't want the cuts to impact the students, because when you get class sizes too large, what's important for our families is they can have access to that teacher and individual the conversations with their teachers. Other things that we've done to reduce costs, we are looking at transportation, ways to make sure that we're talking with the state to get as much reimbursement as we can. It's not a lot, but we have hazardous roads, and so we're forced to pick up students regardless of where they are. We do that anyway. It's a free service that we offer. We don't get reimbursed for transportation, so it's about $650,000 that we have to pay for our transportation costs, but there is an opportunity for us to get a little bit of it's not a lot, but the reimbursement is $3,000. Yes, is that small change, but yet it means something. We're looking for all of the opportunities that we can. We've been meeting with, and I'll pause here in a minute to let you guys kind of pick apart some and ask questions, but we've been meeting once a month since January, different leaders in the community. And they challenged us, well, what is our open enrollment in? What does our open enrollment out look like? Meaning having people come to our school versus them choosing other schools. That's a hard thing for me because I understand when our numbers are getting better. So our open enrollment in continues to grow and our open enrollment out is declining. So it means we're getting more students. People are choosing Salem over other schools, and that's really exciting. It's not necessarily helpful for the neighboring districts, I'll be honest, because it's taking their revenue when it's putting it with us. However, we've been really intentional about going after students in private schools, virtual schools, and schools right across the border. And we've been doing that because, first of all, if we go to schools right across the border, there are many people who are looking for that traditional type of education again. They're wanting to have learning experiences that they may not be getting in schools, in public schools in Illinois, so they put their kids in a private school. Well, we figured out our school, it might be a little bit longer of a drive, but it's cheaper with tuition than paying their private school. So we've had several, just this past month, we've had a handful of families take their children out of a private Christian school and bring them back because of our strong special ed programming, our athletics, and our elective programs. Bringing back, like I said, those, we have we're doing things that we believe our families and our students are really wanting based upon the feedback that they're giving us. So that's one of the ways we're looking and targeting our revenue. And having virtual options is something that we're looking at trying to get in with our schedule, which wouldn't be an additional cost. So some of our students who have elected to have, maybe they don't want to take social studies in our school because they want to teach it to have a different program. They can take it through a virtual program and then come to us for everything else. And so that means it's still an open enrollment for our program. So there are ways that we are doing what we can to bring in revenue despite there being some obstacles with how we're able to use the money that the money that maybe isn't necessarily there because of the revenue limit cap from 1993 and then 2010. I've said a lot. Yeah. What question is please?
Yeah, well, Paddock Lake, I will say, is working to try and get more housing in the area, even though we've been doing pretty good. We need to do better on that. And how many students would it take, would you say, to make you whole?
That is such an interesting question because I'll take any kids that you can bring me. But anytime you bring the kids in, we still want to make sure we have the teachers available. So we were talking to Alex not long ago, and we did share a number that would be helpful. Do you want to share?
So it's right around like 300 students, but keep in mind too, like the more students you bring in, then you're going to have to obviously bring in more staff for those, which is a good problem to have, right? But it's still a thing that we do. So it's a hard set, but basically it'd probably be around 315, 320 students, because for those amount of kids brought in, you'd have to obviously hire more teachers. With teachers come salary and benefits and things like that. And transportation costs, you might have to have another bus. We'd have probably, if we had another 300 kids, we'd have to have another 3 buses. Well, Dousman charges, it's about $27,000 per bus for a year roughly. So yeah, we spend about $650,000 in transportation a year. And so all those things also eat into that money too.
That would be amazing. We would love that.
Yeah.
So the facility's capable of the extra 300?
So in past years, we have had classes of 5 grade levels per grade level, particularly in grades K through 5. Now, because of class sizes, they have been reduced a little bit just from natural attrition, from teachers obviously leaving, and then we were able to obviously combine teachers and grade levels to keep those classes smaller. So to answer the question, yes, we would have room for that.
You talked about discussions to look for administrative efficiencies. I find it hard to believe that many administrators are willing to give up their job to allow for the efficiencies of a unified administration. Mm-hmm. You know, it seemed to make the most combined administration. We have a combined high school and 3 feeder schools going to that high school. So it would seem to make the most sense if those 3 feeder schools were looking at some type of combined administration. But I can't see administrators who would be leading that discussion doing it too willingly.
It's funny that you say that because that's the same thing I think I've said a number of times. It's going to take someone humbling themselves and I'll be honest, like this, and I say this a number of times, this process has brought me to my knees asking taxpayers to help bring in more money. It's the taxpayers' dollars. I do believe that we need to step aside of our ego, like put our ego aside and find an administrator that these 3 communities are excited about and interview that person and then send the other people away. I could be talking myself out of a job, but at this point, like if I'm having to have this conversation every 3 years, I don't know how people do it. Honestly, so this is my first time in Wisconsin. Like this is my 3rd year here, so this is my very first referendum. You guys are built different. For the administrators, you're built different because like this is hard to ask taxpayers who are on a fixed income, who and in this area we just looked at census data. People don't want to move here. Like they love it. They come and they move and they stay. And so you've got families or like people who have again fixed incomes because they've loved the area. And so thank you for building more. But I hate asking people for more money. I don't. It's not a great feeling. So if you could get these communities to rally around, have conversations. We just had a board meeting or a finance committee meeting. Like that's going to be a real thing we have to aggressively go after. If that means I'm out of a job and it helps us not have to keep doing this to taxpayers, please let's do that. Because if you did that, if districts did that, they can go back, they can levy differently. So that's why Tree Room Wilmot, they have a whole different, they're in a different area because they got to restart. So they're not stuck at that 1993. They were able to work with the community to reestablish. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Well,
So
it doesn't necessarily have to be using one district administrator. There can just be shared services, taking baby steps to share.
yeah, no, you're right. I'm getting like
Yeah,
I'm like over here,
right,
but no,
sharing
you're right.
principals
Yeah.
or nurses, or just any sort of service that can scale. We should at least talk about those.
We do that on a smaller scale a little bit as far as like a speech path and different things like that. So there are positions we do that for currently, but obviously not when we're talking to the administrator level.
And it would also address just like with like the opener, like we have students that live closer to Bristol and so they go to Bristol. We've got kids that are, they're residents of Bristol, but they come to Salem, so they open enroll into us and ours. And I'm like, well, we're right there. Like, why do we keep doing this to each other? Because you're stealing from me and I'm stealing from you. Honestly, that's a little bit, it feels like, because now I'm like, yes, I got another one at the expense of someone else's school. Like, that doesn't feel great, I'll be honest. I mean, for consumers, like from capitalism, we're doing good. Like, we're like, I love it when I get more kids because I get, it's forcing us to be better, more innovative. It's also kind of crummy too, though.
You're asking for 2 million more a year, per year? 2 million?
2 million, yep, over 3 years. The way we've ensured it won't be, our portion won't impact the tax increase. So we've made it that over the 3 years, now we can't control your property value. So if your house goes up, I can't control that, good for you. So if your property value increases, I'm happy, but the portion from us won't go up. Over 3 years, it goes down over the 3 years, and there's a calculator that we put on so people can like put in like what's Salem's portion. If my property value goes up this percent, what does my taxes look like with that? And you can see Salem's portion of the impact, and that rate, our impact on people's taxes, it's not gonna change.
And the reason we're able to keep your mill rate flat is we're able to borrow at good rates because we have financial stability. So through audits and all that, right? So that's part of that reason.
Wording. Is it 3 years non-recurring?
Mm-hmm.
You better check your website, because your website says recurring. Recurring. So if you clear that matter up.
Yeah,
Right? It's a little technical thing because it could go on for eternity.
Perpetuity, yeah.
So, clear that little thing up.
Yeah, thank you, yeah. She's on it right now. Thank you.
One thing I'll mention is that I have had the opportunity, I've been invited to attend their community leaders meetings and workshops and outreach. Vicki and Nicole and their staff has reinstilled my faith in the education system in this area. They truly are fiscally responsible and conservative, and they're innovative and run it similar to the way our village runs our village. Is more like a business, and they're since Vicki has taken over and Nicole has been on the board and their staff has restructured, they have been running it more like a business as well. So for that standpoint, I have confidence in the fact that they are doing everything they can to find the ways to save money and increase the revenue, and looking outside of the box to do that in an innovative way. So I will commend them on that. So yeah.
That means a lot. Thanks, Alex.
One of the other things I'll be doing is, as a village president, sending a letter to the state, encouraging the state to revisit their formula as to how they pay schools, because it's an unfortunate payment structure that the state has set up as they pay schools. And because, as Vicki mentioned, our area has been fiscally conservative, the state is unfairly penalizing our students by not paying enough. And you probably see this trend going throughout the state with multiple schools going to referendum. And it's not capital, it's for operational purposes. They're just not able to make ends meet. Now, I have no, say in what other schools are doing and no background, some may be fiscally irresponsible, but I can tell you Salem has been fiscally responsible, so. And hopefully the state will revisit the way their payment structure to schools, so. And if my letter can be one more letter that can help, I'm happy to do it.
Well, at minimum to the lowest funded schools, right?
Yes,
You know, like at
absolutely.
least get the bottom.
At
up.
least equalize.
Right.
Because if it would have stayed up with inflation since 2010, we'd have another almost $3,000 per pupil. We've got an extra 1,000 kids, right? So that's $3 million we're asking for. We never even need to go to referendum if it would have just stayed up with inflation. It's just how it's been.
I didn't know. So, any other questions from the board or the residents?
Can I say one thing, just simply
Absolutely.
because if this does get captured, I want to make sure we know. So they are looking at the biennial budget right now. And in July, that it may change things. So I want it like on the record that if we're made whole, or if we get the money that we need, or even close to the amount that we need
From the state.
we will not ask for the full, like we'll under levy from the perspective of how much we're asking. Because we are not looking to increase, we're just trying to maintain. So like, I want just see the record, like I want people to know that that's my commitment. And
And I can tell you that the village is trustee Poole has mentioned, Tim is working very hard today. This morning, we just met with 2 developers, and we're hoping to increase our development here in a managed way that will also help with the school's property tax and revenue, so, yeah.
It's very interesting that 30 years ago when I started working here, the mantra from the schools, don't develop, don't put more kids in the schools.
Yeah.
And now 30 years later, we've heard from the administrator at our superintendent from the grade school and from the high school more.
Yeah.
It's interesting how the ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And I have one question for the school. Of this $11,325, is all of that going with the student to the new school, or is some of it stayed behind?
We keep about a little over $2,000 for that.
Right.
So when a kid open enrolls out, we still capture about
Right.
between 20, like 2,000
And
and
it's a
2,500.
percentage,
It's
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's usually around $2,000.
So in reality, you could be even harmed more than the $11,325.
Yes.
Because
Correct.
the other school is keeping a portion of
Right.
that. It's not in addition, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And part of that too is like when we have kids who open enrollment in, like while we want those kids to come into our district, again, you still have to balance that with how many staff you have too. So that's why in the previous board meeting, we end up having like seats for each grade level, because again, you don't want class sizes to get high enough where you'd have to actually then hire another staff member in that grade level. So you try to get it to as high as you feel comfortable as a school and as the community feels per class with class sizes without going over that number, so then you'd have to hire another teacher. So.
And one last thing, 300 thereabouts in students. We talked about almost 200 units today from 2 different developers, actually 3 different developers. That doesn't mean that each home will have 3 kids.
No.
And 3 kids go to their school. So I just want to caution, let's not panic and start throwing developers out because.
Yeah, we don't have a population requirement, yeah.
But I think it's good for the community though regardless, like.